Hi, thanks for joining us today on Uptime Logistics. Of course, it's powered by CAP Logistics, and I'm your host, Doug Draper with the Denver Transportation Club. Today, we have an amazing discussion on a very, very important topic, and I'm excited to welcome in our guest, Scot Snyder. Scott, how you doing, man?
I am doing very good, Doug. Thank you for having us.
Yes, no problem. So we're going to be talking about an organization that Scott is near and dear to his heart and actually founded, and it's really rooted around military transition from active duty into, the new job career of their life in logistics. And so Scott is the president and the co-founder of Troops2Logistics. And Scott, we're welcoming you to the show and so glad you could join us. So before we jump into it, it's important to learn a little bit about yourself just for a minute or two, and then obviously talk to us about Troops2Logistics, kind of how it came about, your passion behind it, and we'll start off there. So we'll go.
All right, fantastic. And again, thanks, Doug and Uptime Logistics for giving us this opportunity to talk about our nonprofit for veterans looking to transition into logistics careers. Myself, I'm retired U.S. Army. During my military career, I was in logistics and transportation, believe it or not. I was also in incident management, domestic operations, and also recruiting. And so I did that for 20 plus years. And there was a break in my military service where I was a National Guard or reservist, traditional, the 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks in the summer. And it was during that time, for about 10 years, I was in the sales and operations in the freight management, LTL, truckload world in Southern California. So I had a taste of the civilian logistics early in life, and I've always treasured that time, in addition to my military time, of course. And it was really, I guess, with the internal passion of putting these two backgrounds and interests of mine together with a gentleman, a friend of mine from the logistics industry, Brad Reinhardt, who is the president of the LTNA group, a nationwide trade organization, that we decided in 2019 to why not come up with a program that's specific in logistics careers and not just all careers for veterans, Guard, Reserve, and military spouses looking to transition into that career.
That's great. So you mentioned one of your partners in crime that got started, and we're going to be talking to another individual that's involved with the program that we'll hear from her a little bit later, but Robin Grubb, who's involved with as a mentor for the program. We'll dive into that a little bit later, but she has extensive experience with the American Red Cross in logistics and supply chain. So we're excited to talk to her here in a few minutes. But let's talk a little bit more about the origins of Troops2Logistics, like the who, what, where, when, and why of the founding, and maybe a little bit about the three tenets that the program was involved with. So tell us a little bit more about the why and the founding, if you don't mind.
You bet. So I mentioned a few minutes ago that Brad Reinhardt and myself started this. Brad is he's an industry professional out of the St. Louis area. He's a president of a logistics company, and he has 25, 30 years in the industry. Now, Brad's not a veteran, but he's always wanted to assist veterans. In fact, it's kind of ironic. I actually met Brad for the first time at a national meeting in Denver about 8 years ago. And that's when we started a conversation about what we could do for veterans, because Brad had said that their nonprofit wanted to find another cause. And he thought, why not veterans? That's a great cause. So again, back in 19, Brad and I talked specific about what we wanted to do. And that was to provide an opportunity for veterans to transition into leadership roles in the industry, or at least supervisory positions. You know, we understand that there's a great need for blue collar work in the logistics field, such as drivers and mechanics, and that's fine. Those are great jobs. But we kind of thought that the other roles were kind of not being dealt with or really provided the services or transition service that they deserved. So we focus on those careers. and we have three tenets we believe that help us accomplish that mission. And the first one is mentoring. The second one is personal branding. And the third one is job sourcing. Mentoring is the first phase. It's the biggest and most important phase. Typically, it consumes the most amount of time during that transition period, is helping that veteran understand what they have to do to find that type of work in the civilian world based on their military background.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Yeah, the other, the personal branding and the job sourcing, we'll talk about the mentoring in more detail here in a few minutes, but I like the word personal branding and then obviously job sourcing. So let's take those separately real quick. Personal branding, what does that mean as I'm transitioning out of the military into the private sector?
We believe that in today's corporate world, and when it comes to a long-term career, that like most Americans, you're probably going to have more than one job during your adult life. You're probably going to work for more than one company. So it's very important that you brand yourself. You incorporate yourself. You develop the skills and confidence that allow you to be flexible when that time comes that you need to move on for whatever reason. Maybe you decide to do it, or maybe something happens like a buyout or the facility, the business gets closed. So we believe that personal branding is really a responsibility for everyone that wants to have a long-term professional career. You always have to be branding yourself. And there's different ways of doing that. Networking is part of it, big part of it. Social media, being involved with different variety of maybe associations, and education. So that's what personal branding means for us and to the veterans that we help.
Got it. Yeah, I really like getting engaged with associations. You know, it's one thing, and that's how you and I initially met, Scott, was through the Denver Transportation Club.
That's right.
I'm a big fan of, hey, if you're going to get into a career and you want to give back and get engaged, you know, don't just show up and punch a clock and say you were at this networking event, but get engaged and participate.
Yeah.
And that'll speak volumes to your character, which will help with your personal branding. So I'm going to switch over to job sourcing. Talk a little bit about that. I know it's more than just a job board and, hey, here's 5 jobs, go ahead and click this button. Talk to us about how you guys approach the job sourcing aspect of it.
Sure. Job sourcing for us really is just a result of doing good mentoring and personal branding. And so we believe that by doing that, doing those things well, that opportunities will come up. For example, our mentors are all from different parts of the industry. Mm-hmm. They may hear of a position available maybe with their firm or with another company. Or I may come up with something just because I also talk to a lot of HR people. And so once we understand our candidate and their skill set and what their vision and passion is, then we can align those when opportunities become available. And we can simply just call an HR person with a company and say, hey, this is who I have. I know based on your company and culture, this is what you're looking for. So many times it's sending a resume before there's ever a job open.
Yeah, no, that's great. You know, the other piece that we talked about was obviously the 3 tenets, right? But there's also the mission statement or the vision statement, as you guys had put it. And this one's kind of cool. It's eradicate. So here's the vision statement. Eradicate the transitional barriers to logistics. Eradicate the transition barriers to logistics. I like it because it's overcoming. That's what folks are used to doing in the military. But the one thing that comes to my attention is, what are those common barriers, you know, and why do they exist? So we're going to break down the barriers, but for our listeners, like, what are they? And why do you think they're there, whether it's perceived or real? Talk about those barriers.
Well, thanks for recognizing and liking our vision statement so much. Yeah. You know, we like that eradicate word too. It's bold, right? It's kind of like throwing a grenade at the problem. So what we're looking, yeah, you know, like the barrier is the wall and the grenade, you know, so we're going to take that down. So there is some real barriers and there's some perceived ones. Some of the real barriers is, hey, does that veteran have the confidence to sit in front of someone on an interview and understand that and speak their language? That's a pretty real barrier. What about the employer that doesn't have time to train somebody for 6 months on how that things are done in the civilian community? They want to hire this veteran. They've got great leadership background. They're motivated. They have great character, but do they have the necessary technical skills? So those are some of the barriers, and through the networking and personal branding, we hope we can overcome those. Some of the perceived are, is this veteran going to fit in with us? Is he going to walk in and like try to take over the office because, you know, he's got a big voice and he or she has been in charge of people and used to giving out commands and orders? Is that what this veteran is going to do in our office? Or what about that veteran that may have been deployed a few times, maybe been in combat? You know, they may be concerned about their mental or behavioral issues, right? Those are some of the things that aren't real necessarily, but they are things that the civilian workforce and the leaders think about.
Yeah. I think it's real important to bring that to the table, right? Because I think a lot of that is perceived, but people do think that, like, oh my gosh, is this guy going to get in a situation that's a little stressful, and how is this individual going to react? You know, and I think the fact that you just bring it to the table and like, hey, you know, no, this isn't going to happen, and here's why. I think it's cool that you guys don't hide that underneath the rug and really come forth and address it, because I truly believe that stuff is perceived, right? One thing that was interesting that we spoke about before the show is kind of like, hey, I did this thing in the military, right? And the terminology and the nomenclature may not transfer to the same language used in the private sector. So maybe there's a couple of examples you could say, hey, here's what I did in the military, and how does that apply to a job that is more civilian based, and try to connect those, link those together. So the hiring company would be to say, yeah, okay, I get it. It's called an XYZ in the military, but that's pretty much what we do here in the management of whatever. Do you have any examples like that?
I actually have quite a few. I'll share. I know time is an issue, so I'll just share maybe one or two. One is one of the positions that is common in the Army and the Marine Corps, and I say that because I know those two branches the best, myself personally, is a job called motor sergeant. And typically a motor sergeant is a person that's in charge of a motor pool. And a motor pool is made up of vehicles and equipment, a variety of sizes, motors, all sorts of stuff. And it could be a large number of vehicles. We could be talking hundreds. And that motor sergeant is not only in charge of that equipment from an inventory standpoint, he or she is in charge of the maintenance scheduling, and the personnel that work on it, which means the personnel have to be trained and certified. And so that motor sergeant or that transportation officer have a lot of great skills that I think they can transition into a position such as fleet maintenance or management, or a maintenance leadership role for a trucking company, because they have already shown the ability and understanding of why maintenance is important, how to be proactive, and how to train people and lead people to keep things ready to go. So that's one. Another one is the transportation NCO or officer that gets into mobility projects. A lot of times this happens when there's a deployment, either a stateside deployment or overseas deployment. And it takes a lot of coordination and planning. That's what I mean by coordination is you're going to have to coordinate with other departments and other places within that military community, maybe on that base, maybe on another base, and also probably with some civilian resources, because you're going to have to outsource a little bit to get all the logistic support you need to make that deployment happen. You can only imagine having 25 flatbed trucks with equipment on them. Half of them are going to a rail, and they're going to be loaded on flat rail cars, the most efficient, cost-effective way. They're going to have secondary loads on top of them. Some of that's hazardous material, all strapped down and chained down properly so it's safe and certified by the rail inspector. And then all of that goes onto a software program that tracks all the pieces in transit visibility, because there's barcodes and there's the I can't think of the word now, the boxes for tracking on all the equipment. And so, and this stuff is going all different directions. Some might stay on the highway, some might go to a rail, some might do those things, but end up at a port and then go onto a ship, and you do a load plan for a ship, and then you send it overseas. So, that I think works right into the civilian logistics community on managing transportation movement.
Yeah. Yeah. Collaboration, partnerships, and utilizing your resources, military or otherwise, those are skill sets you need in the logistics world for sure, especially in 2021 and how crazy things are out there. So I know we'll get involved with Robin here in a few minutes as a mentor, but talk about the mentoring program, maybe a quick summary of what it is specific to Troops2Logistics and why that's unique within your organization.
Well, what we try to do with our mentoring program is when a veteran comes to us, one of our candidates, and typically it's myself or another staff person, is the first person that they speak with over the phone. And we review their resume. We talk about what they want to do, what they've been doing, where they want to go. Are they open to relocating? All that wonderful stuff. And then based on their skills and interests, we match them up with one of our industry experts like Robin. And based on their skills and background, we bring them together. And our goal is that they're going to be able to have an open line of communication. Because you see, in the military community, mentoring is very common practice, and between senior and lower level. And so if you spent 4 or 5 years or longer in the military, you have played the role at least as a mentee. So you understand what that role is and what the expectations are. And so by having that background, we believe that mentor-mentee relationship could work very well, because both sides should understand their role and what's expected out of their role. And so the goal is to, over time, that mentor works with that mentee to help them grow into the civilian world, to take off the military uniform and put on a civilian shirt and coat or jacket, whatever you're going to wear for that job. And that's the plan. And that's what we do in the mentoring side. And then we support it with the personal branding as well. But the mentoring is very, very critical, because that's all about the confidence building, right? You got to have that confidence, and also some additional networking never hurts.
Robin, I'm curious to hear more about your connection and how you came to get to know Scott and your involvement. So, ball's in your court. Tell us about yourself.
Well, thank you so much, Doug. My background is basically a military spouse and a military daughter. So both of my husband and my father are retirees from the Army, and I have 30 years of a logistical experience working with companies in the public, private, and government establishments. And now I'm currently employed, as we had talked earlier, with a Red Cross, and I'm a category manager for transportation and fleet services, and I'm proud that I still work for a company that provides 24/7 support to our military members wherever they might be.
That's great. How do you and Scott know each other? How did you become engaged with Troops2Logistics?
Well, I actually found the website, and I reached out to Scott and said that I would like to participate. I did have experience with my dad and my husband, just challenging coming out into the work field. And it's different. It's different from military to civilian life, and there's some challenges there. And I think that it's a great idea, and I love the idea of helping the troops transition.
That's great. Well, we talked about the personal branding and the job sourcing, which are creative and definitely value. But the one thing that differentiates your program from others is really the mentoring aspect of it. And I'm real excited that Robin's purpose here today is that she is one of those mentors. And so it's interesting to learn about the program itself, what makes it unique. So maybe, Robin, let's just start with you on that one. Talk to us about what the mentoring program is all about on Troops2Logistics.
Sure. So I want to start out with why I became a mentor. So it's full circle for me. While my husband was a drill sergeant, and we had troops that arrived every week, and they were all stationed up in there, away from their homes, their families. They also brought along their spouses who was new to the military and didn't really know how the system worked, how to reach out for resources, and just get in tuned with the military and the step there. So I
Mm-hmm.
took that role on for my husband's spouses that were coming in there. And so I mentored them in how to be a military spouse, right? So when this opportunity came up, it was like the second half of the circle.
Okay.
So now I go to these folks and we talk about, coming out of the military and how to get into the civilian world and how to take those skill sets that make them, really viable to the market and understanding what those military terms and acronyms and how to coordinate those to what the civilians understand and can, re-emphasize. A lot of employers are looking for those cost savings, what you can do to show that you've saved money. And it's really hard for those military folks to come out and understand what the drive of the civilian market is, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's going to market. It's showing that you got your stakeholders and your bean counters that the numbers are reporting, and you just don't really do that in the military. The military is always the mission.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really about getting them um, in roles that align with what they did, or possibly where they want to do logistics and they're really not sure what the market would offer. So some people like a very black and white, like regulations. So
Mm-hmm.
I talk to them about customs brokerage, which is really driven by regulations. So there's a lot of options, and you just kind of have a good conversation with your mentee and just really understand what their likes and dislikes are, and just really try to focus on a point of logistics that would really suit their skill sets.
Mm. Nice. As a mentor, how often do you engage and talk with your mentee? Right, all the
I
things that you. Yeah, go ahead.
I try to stay with my mentee until they're placed somewhere in a job, and then I check back with them just to see how they're doing. My first success story went really well. She had a lot of questions about sitting through interviews and how to ask questions back to the company that was interviewing her.
Mm-hmm.
And so we walked through that. We did some mock interview things and how to engage for things that she wanted to know. And luckily, she did the interview and got the job, and she's very healthy, happy where she's at. And I'm very pleased with it.
That's great. Yeah. So do you still keep in contact with her? Is
Yep.
there any like post mentoring that transpires?
Not a lot of post mentoring, but I do let her know that we're still here if she needs any additional feedback or just advice. And I have her on my LinkedIn.
There you go. Nice. So, yeah, that's definitely unique, and it's not just here's your brand and here's how to find jobs. You're really engaging with the individual, which differentiates the process, and you were outlining a great success story. So, Robin, what advice would you give somebody, a veteran that's preparing to leave active duty and wants to get into logistics, right? Hey, I'm ending my first career. I want to start my second one. I know that supply chain logistics is my passion right now. What advice would you give that individual as they're entering that second phase?
My first and best advice is the sooner you can engage, the better for your career. If they are getting out and it's 6 months out, that's about a good time to start looking what the market is,
Mm-hmm.
developing your resume, which we help with also, and just getting feelers out there to what the job market is, what positions are available, and starting to refine those to what your skill sets are.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, and then so maybe so that's the advice to get into the industry, and now you have somebody that's looking. Maybe this is diving a little bit into your secret sauce as a mentor, but what advice would you give to somebody that's currently looking that may want to get involved and understand what Troops2Logistics does, or just general comments like, hey, if you're in the thick of it and you're out of the military. What advice would you give them that are actively engaged in looking?
They're actively engaged in looking as always, reach out to us and just, Scott is a good first filter for our group, and we'll kind of align that person and skill sets with the mentors
Mm-hmm.
so that we have a good alignment to get them a better start in their profession of where they tend to want to go within logistics.
Mm-hmm.
So I have contacts within my 30 years of expenses, so that I might have a company that I know could fit their skill set that I could give them a direct contact. Now, again, we're not a job board, but if we do find an alignment, we will make those introductions.
That's great. Yeah, I think what I'm hearing you say is just engage. Call us. There's
Absolutely.
you guys have done this. You know what's happening. You know the successes, the pitfalls. So I like the fact you're like, just call us. I think that was the first thing you made mention of is just engage. And speaking of which, if they wanted to engage, talk to our audience about how they get in touch with you and the organization.
So basically, we have the website is basically the Troops2Logistics.com, and just reach out. And like I said, Scott is the first filter. He really aligns that person with the correct mentee,
Mm-hmm.
and he really does a great job making sure that our skill sets are aligned and that we can really get those people off to a good start and a quick start, and making sure they hit marketing with themselves into the industry.
Well, Scott and Robin, I can't thank you guys enough for joining us today and talking to our audience about Troops2Logistics. You're doing some amazing things out there, helping our veterans transition into an awesome industry that I know you and I both love and are passionate about, and we always need
Yeah.
great folks to take us to the next level. So I can't thank you enough of both for joining us.
Thank you again so much.
Yeah, of course, of course. And I'd like to thank our audience for joining us today on Uptime Logistics. Of course, it's powered by CAP Logistics. You can find more information about the show in the description below. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. And please visit caplogistics.com for all of your customized transportation needs. Until we speak again, thanks for joining us, and have a great day.